Right, so here I am at Bradford Cathedral, where Rowan Williams is going to be speaking this afternoon, so I may be making a citizen's arrest for terrorism, or I may be asking him an open question. We'll just see how it goes. Good afternoon, Rowan. It's the 22nd of May 2019 and it's about 2:30, and I'm briefly emerging from video retirement. Obviously, to reassure you, I haven't been and won't be seducing any priests. But you've probably figured that out, given that your skin hasn't been saved yet. And also, of course, to wish you a happy anniversary, because tomorrow, the 23rd of May, is the 15th anniversary of you having me kicked out of St Michael's Church in Headingley, because you hoped that by causing me such devastation and traumatising me that I was going to capitulate and say I'd made it up about David Peach, your perverted pretend astrophysical clergy friend, that I'd made it up that he was sexually harassing me, and you thought I was going to come under his control so you could be controlling me by proxy. But that didn't happen, so here we are, 15 minutes later. 15 minutes later, 15 years later. 15 minutes was too long for this situation to be resolved. It should have been resolved at the time, instantly, when I was there. I shouldn't have been made to wait 15 minutes, never mind 15 years, and having my life totally wrecked. So the powers that shouldn't be could try and discredit me and save their blue-eyed boy and puppet, who is you, yourself, and you. So anyway, this isn't the only subject of my video, and in fact I'm talking about the lecture that you gave at Bradford Cathedral on the 20th of May 2019. You can see the details of it up on the screen there. So I'm not going to go over the lecture because, well, we can see the title there about national identity. And of course, predictably, you started off talking about national identity and then went on to say, oh, how we have to have cooperation between nations and it's all going to be hearts and flowers and this kind of thing. And you made the statement that you make in every single lecture or address that you give on this subject or similar subjects: crises don't read maps. And you said that, for example, environmental crises and disease don't read maths. And in fact, I asked you a question about this in the question and answer session afterwards, which unfortunately has been omitted from the audio recording made by Bradford Cathedral, which is now on their website. And for some mysterious reason, my phone didn't record it either, when it recorded everything else perfectly well. So I didn't even know if there would be an audio or a video of this lecture, and I saw that my phone hadn't recorded my question and your answer, so I came and nobbled you again over coffee after the lecture and asked you some related questions. So I did manage to record that, the audio of it, and I'm going to play that shortly. But I just want to say that I also asked you a question about Sudan and South Sudan, which you'd referred to in your lecture, and I'm going to play some footage of things that you've said about Sudan and South Sudan previously, and also what you said in this lecture on Monday, the 20th of May. You referred to it there, so I'm going to play that clip of the audio from that, which is from the Bradford Cathedral website, and I shall link the whole lecture in the show notes.
The referendum is due at the beginning of next year. A great many of those things which should have been done in preparation for the referendum have not been done. Border questions are unresolved. The question of how the referendum is to be implemented in the border area of Abyei, as Archbishop Daniel has said, is unresolved and getting more serious by the day. And the situation of southern refugees in northern Sudan, and there may be up to 4 million of them, is a matter of real concern, because if there is a vote for separation next year, their status in the north will be even more vulnerable than it is at the moment. The threat of open war, of course, in and after the referendum the most serious thing of all, and that signals a return to what have been decades of slaughter and poverty and utter instability in a very large, very vulnerable country, which also has an important impact on its immediate neighbours in the region. The UK government has a good record of involvement in Sudan, and I think that's been recognised. I think even during this year, pressure has come from HMG in a helpful way. Now that we have the presidency of the Security Council next month, it seems there's a very good opportunity for Britain to show some leadership, and I believe that that is very much in view. I would like to see, and I'm very confident we shall see, our government stepping up to the plate on this and keeping up the pressure on the international community to do the kind of monitoring that is needed in Sudan, to apply the pressure that's needed on the government in Khartoum to avoid the kind of disaster that we all fear.
Last year I visited South Sudan, a country which carried such high hopes when it was first created 3-4 years ago, and which has so sadly disappointed those hopes by descending again into the worst kind of violence, sadly fueled by personal political rivalries. And my memory is of a very overcrowded civilians camp. No sewage, no electricity, and one tent devoted to looking after children, giving them something to do during the day. Bits of paper for them to colour, just to keep them engaged with something. It's the tiniest of things in a way, but actually it is taking these children as seriously as anybody else. It's saying they're not waste, they're not dispensable people, and above all I think showing them that somebody was actually looking out for them, caring for their interests. And the other moment in South Sudan was in Juba, and the women of this cooperative had lost pretty well everything, their savings, their equipment, when the violence first erupted in December of 2013. And they showed me the old metal strongbox in which they'd kept their savings, which had been broken open with a crowbar. And they shrugged their shoulders and they smiled and said, well, you know, this happens, and now we start again. And I thought that the courage and calm of these women, as we sat with them, listened to their stories, prayed with them, sang with them, the courage and the vision of these women simply showed why this matters and why we are, in a very, very important way, I think, as Christian Aid, going with the grain of people's hopes and energies. And that's a very hopeful thing for us. In the last decade or so, what was once the state of Sudan has been divided between Sudan and South Sudan. Ethnic tensions of the most violent kind between North and South condemned Sudan for decades to a bloody and terrible civil war. The South, largely Christian and animist as opposed to the Muslim North, finally attained nationhood some 7 or 8 years ago, and promptly collapsed into its own internal civil war. And that's something which ought to give us continuing pause about taking for granted that there is, as I say, a simple story to tell about nationality and statehood, without asking how we manage, how we understand and cater for ongoing diversity, the ongoing needs of minorities.
So you don't think that globalisation is just an excuse for international power brokers to redraw the map to their advantage then? It's all about mutuality and help between nations.
Globalisation, absolutely. I think there are other kinds of internationalism which are not just another power play. But there's not much time for it.
No. Are you aware of the international interest in Sudan, South Sudan? You didn't mention that. You made it more sound like a tribal conflict.
I shouldn't have given that impression. I've been there. I know that it's not. I know that it's minerals. I know that it's any number of things.
A very oil-rich region of Africa.
Very oil-rich region, tragedy. But it breaks it off.
So there's two things I'd like to say about that brief exchange there. I'm quite sorry I rushed on from asking you what you meant by the time's not right yet for international. You didn't say international agreement or international government or anything like that. But I'd already planned to ask you about Sudan and South Sudan. And I'm guessing from the way you responded to that, you don't really know anything about the situation there, the political situation, despite having been there, because you were casting around for information. And I could see this by the expression on your face, which was why I provided you with more information. It's a very oil-rich area of Africa, but you didn't even appear to know anything, and you simply repeated back to me, it's a very oil-rich area of Africa, which is a technique I've come across before in people who like blagging it. They're relying on you for all the information, and they simply repeat what you've said, but you didn't really give any information about the situation in Sudan and South Sudan, so I think you're just drawing attention to this area. You're reading the script, and you don't actually have any idea about all the international involvement and the manipulation of the situation there. And I've spoken about that in videos before, so I won't go over it again now. But it was quite apparent to me that you had absolutely no idea what you were talking about. I could see your face as well. And the bewilderment on it, really. And obviously you're quite worried about yourself in my presence, in case, I don't know, cast you down with a bolt of lightning or something. So that's all I've got to say about that, really, and perhaps we'll find out one day what is the timescale for international, whatever that may mean. So that's the end of my video and the end of my brief emergence from video retirement, but I may emerge again at some time in the future. You never know. It just depends what happens and what I've got to say. But in the meantime, I shan't be seducing any priests until you're in jail, and then of course I'll be with my beloved in his arms, having a really good time. So make sure you keep thinking about that. And so I'll bid you farewell for the time being. Hasta la próxima!